Hello, and welcome to Relationship Matters, a mental health podcast where two relational psychotherapists dive into topics that you actually want to know more about. My name is Jason,
And I'm Carling,
and we're all about improving connection.
and enhancing relationships.
Hi, Carly.
Hey, Jason. Oh, I'm so excited to be here because we have a very special guest today.
That we do. That we do. I'm very excited to be here. I'm excited to
hmm
dive in. I'm excited to introduce our special guest. That if you're
Yeah,
listening to this, you won't be able to see. But if you're watching this, you already see who our guest is. So,
absolutely.
who is this guest as a car drives by?
So,
I don't know
is
if you
that,
heard that
yeah,
or
I heard
not.
that a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
Brock, will you do us the honors and let us know, let our listeners know a bit about you?
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Brock. I'm starting a placement at Relationship Matters really soon. I guess in a few weeks, really, April. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm a student at Martin Luther University College. I'm in my master's program right now in the spiritual care and psychotherapy program. So I'm really excited to sort of make the transition from student to, I guess, student therapist.
Hmm.
Really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are so
Yeah.
pumped to have you on our team. We got so excited. I don't even know when it was several months ago you reached out and it all just transpired beautifully. That and getting
Hmm.
to know you and feeling just such a perfect alignment with our team here at
Mhm.
Relationship Matters. So, very excited that you're starting in a few weeks. And today we're just going to spend some time getting to know you and asking you some awesome questions related to your interests and becoming closer and closer to being a registered psychotherapist. And we also have some questions from our listeners that are given to us anonymously that we'd love to hear your wisdom. Later in today's podcast, and answering some of those
Alright.
questions, if that's all right with you, Brock.
That sounds
Excellent.
exciting. Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Well,
Cool. Cool.
Brock, my
So let's
first,
just
yeah,
dive
can we
in.
just dive in? Is that okay, Jason? Or do you have, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you.
No, 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 no. Go for it. It's not an interruption. It's just let's dive in. Carling, take it away.
Awesome. Brock, I'm just really curious in learning more because your program is called, correct me if I'm wrong, spiritual counseling and psychotherapy or spiritual care and psychotherapy.
Spiritual
Is that
care
right?
and psychotherapy. Yeah, yeah, spiritual care
Amazing.
and
Can
psychotherapy.
can
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
Can you help us understand perhaps the spiritual care piece to the training that you're
Mhm.
undergoing right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the spiritual care aspect is, I think, recognizing that, in therapy, people come to us and, they may not be religious, or they may be religious, they might be spiritual but not religious. That's sort of a growing
Mhm.
movement today, right? And I think the
Yeah.
spiritual care part is really just all about recognizing how, we can't escape those types of conversations in our work, I think, right? And just sort of
Mhm.
being mindful of how spirituality can impact people's lives. I think just, it's important that we have that vocabulary, I think, to engage with our clients and sort of I
Mhm.
also think today faith and religion can sort of be misunderstood, I think, right? So and
Uh,
just the role it
yeah.
can play in people's lives. So I think my program
Mhm.
is really just all about recognizing that spiritual aspect and how that can be important to many people.
Yeah. That's incredible, and I think that might be a potential gap in other ways that therapists are trained, like with different programs. Excuse me. Definitely Jason and I were trained in the same program and there was some attention to that, but likely not the same amount of attention that the training that you're getting at the program that's designed to really attune to that part of healing that in my experience as a therapist is an incredible part of healing for many of my clients, the spiritual and or religious aspect of that. So really cool that you're part of a program that tunes into that. perhaps a lot. Yeah. Really cool.
Absolutely. And that's really what attracted me to the program, really, right? Just because it was so unique, right? There aren't a lot of
Yeah.
programs in Ontario that have that spiritual aspect. And the great thing is I'm surrounded by so many diverse students, right? Students who are atheists, students who are Buddhists,
Mm-hmm.
Christians, right? The list just goes on. So
Wow.
it's really cool to be in classroom settings where I just get to hear from so many different perspectives and worldviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that's
Right.
something I'll probably be familiar with when I'm a therapist, right? And sort of having that diversity of backgrounds and lived experiences.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I can say that that's a huge asset to be able to have perhaps your own personal lived experience and learning from other people, and that you don't necessarily need to learn so much from your clients if say they believe in a religion that you're not familiar with personally. Is that it sounds like this, this program has allowed you to familiarize yourself in kind of a connection way with other people in your program. And that's really neat. I think that's an asset moving forward as a therapist to have access to that. Really cool.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
You really summed it up quite well there. Yeah, it's
Oh,
so true. I'm really excited. Yeah, it's cool.
amazing. Amazing.
Here's something that comes to mind for me, Brock, is when it comes to spiritual care, given the amount of diversity that's there
Mm-hmm.
amongst your peers in your cohort, and other students on campus. Um, I mean, when we're talking about spiritual care, there's a lot of or spirituality. There's perhaps some associations to religion that happen, which on one hand I understand. So my question to you um, is spirituality and religion, is that the same thing? Are we talking about the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
And is spiritual
Mm.
care religious in nature, or does spirituality have anything to do with religion? Just what's your take on that?
Yeah. Good question.
Great question, Jason. That's something I've thought about a lot actually, and I don't know what if I have coherent answers to that question, but I can try. Yeah, I
That's fair.
think for me, spirituality is okay. Well, so I'm agnostic, right? So I'm sort of
Mm-hmm.
like I'm not religion itself. The rituals don't really play a huge role in my life, but I do recognize that
Mm-hmm.
with religion and how it could differ from spirituality is I think some people need that tangible thing of okay, today is a Sunday, I'm going to church, I need to sit down, I need to be with my peers, right? So I view religion as something that involves ritual rites and you
Mm-hmm.
can practice it in your life. And for me, spirituality is a sort of other thing that's kind of hanging in the background where I don't necessarily maybe have to go to church to be spiritual. Maybe I can meditate, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I can read. And I know
Mm-hmm.
spirituality and religion is going to look very different for everyone, right? And what that means to them might be very different. But
Right.
but yeah, so I think to answer your question, for me, I think religion is more of that, like not necessarily structure, but I do recognize that there's a lot of people who maybe need to again, be a part of a congregation, go to a church, have those
Mm-hmm.
rituals, right? And the spirituality aspect
Mm-hmm.
is something maybe a little more personal, a little more just unique, I guess, in the sense of how that impacts
Mm-hmm.
them in their daily life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Almost like you're really intentional in wanting to get to know the person, what matters to the person,
Mm-hmm.
why it matters, why that's important, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
coming from a place of being quite prescriptive, right? When I think that in hearing words of spirituality or themes of spirituality, that often leads us to, rightfully or wrongfully, it doesn't change that it happens. People think about religion, which is why I asked that
Mm-hmm.
question.
Yeah.
Is this basically saying, "Yay, God, go God," and here's a
Mm-hmm.
very specific worldview that, as a therapist, I'm now kind of forcing you into. as a
Mm,
therapist, now I'm kind of making you, the client, go into that place. And what I'm
mhm.
really hearing you say is, no, not at all. Because as an individual, not really my jam. But what's most my jam is uh, I'm just trying to figure out what matters to you, why that matters
Hmm.
to you, and in what ways that may or may not work.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Hmm. I think that's a good,
absolutely.
distinction to make, because I think there might be some collective assumptions that when practitioners are coming from a spiritual care place, that it's like, I believe in a certain religion and I'm going to perhaps influence you to believe in what I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't know where that
Mm,
assumption comes from. It's definitely something I've just
yeah,
taken on. I'm like, oh yeah, like that's out there out there, this idea. So I think it's really cool
Mm-hmm.
to be perhaps deconstructing that perhaps stereotype that it's out there, that that's not actually what spiritual care means to you, at least, Brock, right? Or to the program that you're a part of
exactly.
currently. Uh-huh. Good.
Yeah, and that's definitely
Well,
something I was sort of
mhm.
navigating as I was applying to my program. I was asking the dean, like, do I have to be religious? Do I have to like,
Yeah.
to take this course? Right? So I was,
Yeah.
I was, there was a lot of things I had to navigate personally to make sure going to
Mhm.
school at the seminary was something for me, and I felt totally welcomed, and it's really
Mhm.
great to think of how sort of you think that spiritual care, the theology, because I have scripture courses, so I'm in
Mhm.
a New Testament course right now where we're reading scripture,
Mhm.
and it's almost like a
Right.
history course in a sense, right? Where we're learning about these
Yeah.
ancient texts and what people's lives were like
Huh.
in the ancient,
Huh.
Roman world, right? And it's really
Mhm.
cool. So I think the takeaway for me is just how spirituality, spiritual care, theology, whatever you want to call it. There's so many names. It's really just like the critical sort of informed. How do I say it? Just the informed reflection of how we live our lives. And then I think in that sense,
Cool.
it can be an everyday practice, right? And we're sort of we're all theologians, in that sense.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I think it's fair to say that religion has had a strong influence on like all of our histories, or perhaps our current day life. And I think, you know, even though we're working with presenting concerns in the here and now, right? That we're all connected to our ancestors. We're all connected to our histories, which parts of our history is influenced by religion, by spirituality, perhaps, right? And I think it's
Absolutely.
interesting that your courses are also offering you perhaps more insight, more learning on what history looks like for maybe most of us living here in North America or elsewhere. I think that's neat. Hmm. And
Absolutely. I
Brock,
think
I was
I think
really,
the history piece.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say that the history, piece is so important because
Hmm.
my previous master's program was in social justice and community engagement, and in that program we totally dove into history, and colonialism and oppression and just everything like what came before us, and here we are now in 2022, and there's so many contemporary issues, but in order to fully grasp them, we have to look back through history, and we have to understand how we got here, and the legacies that were left behind, and how that informs the work we do going forward. Yeah,
I love that. Yeah. I appreciate you know, your learning and around anti-oppression and social justice. This is something that's incredibly important to Jason and I with relationship matters. And we see that mental health issues, current day mental health issues, are often related to perhaps symptoms of belonging to quite a few oppressive systems, right? And thinking about
Mm-hmm.
mhm,
colonialism still heavily insidious in all of our lives right now, and knowing the history and the ancestral traumas related to that, I think, is key in comprehensive psychotherapy. A big part of
Mm-hmm.
why we're very excited to have you on our team, that you have that perhaps foundational knowledge to attune to those pieces, the historical pieces, and also the systemic oppressive pieces that come into relational and mental health. Really, yeah.
Mhm.
Really cool.
Absolutely.
I have so many questions, Jason. I don't I don't want to steal too much spotlight here. Did you have any questions for Brock right now?
Yeah, like let's do some thinking and processing out loud for a second, because
Okay.
part of me is like, let's go more into getting to know Brock and,
Yeah.
and more questions there. The other part of me is also thinking, others have also asked questions, and
Mm-hmm.
let's get to those as well. So I guess let's do a both and, right?
Uh-huh.
Where thinking, it's very much something that Carling and I do all the time. So both and instead of either or.
Exactly.
So
And that's something I've been learning
Brock,
too.
here's this question for you:
Mhm.
is with the stuff that you've been learning thus far, in terms of theories and modalities and all of that stuff, and you're coming to terms with what we would call just being more in tuned with your therapist self. So as you're coming to sort of, not to terms with, but as you're getting to know those different parts of you and they're being developed, and with what you're learning in therapy, what, according to you, what would a typical therapy session look like if Carling and I were a married couple, and we are your clients? What would that look like to you if we were to do therapy and you were our
Mhm.
therapist?
Mhm.
Great question, Jason. Great question. Yeah, I think the important piece to start off is really just recognizing whoever's in the room, right?
Mhm.
Kind of relating back to what we just talked about with the history, right? I think society can never leave the therapy room, right?
Yeah.
People's
Yeah.
histories, their families of origin can never leave the therapy room. So
Yeah.
just being mindful of that, but also going to therapy, like, wow, like that is such a wise and courageous thing to do for anyone at any stage of life,
Mhm.
right? So I
Mhm.
think no matter what, brings someone there, reaching out for help from a mental health professional, it's a sign of strength. It's not weakness. It's not a weak thing to do, right? There's so many
Mhm.
stigmas attached to reaching out to seek mental health services today. But yeah, so I think just how I would approach a session is recognizing those things, but then also paying attention to just, I guess, you as a person, right? We all come from different
Mhm.
backgrounds, lived experience. We all have our different worldviews. So what I would be interested in getting to know is, if you were a couple, I would want to chat about, your family and how you met. And, like I just want to get to know you as a person, right? In
Uh-huh.
therapy, in school right now, like I'm learning all these theories, right? We call them theories of change, theoretical
Mhm.
orientations, for those listening. And it can be
Mhm.
overwhelming. There's so many, right? There's
Yeah.
psychodynamic, existential, narrative therapy, solution
Mhm.
focus, cognitive behavioral, dialectical behavior therapy.
Mhm.
Like all these new terms I was learning in school, and I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, what is all this? So I
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
approaching a session is just about, okay, having that background knowledge, but then putting the books down and actually,
Mhm.
staying attuned to who you are as a person in the moment and not getting
Mhm.
caught up in all these theories, too soon. Yeah.
Really cool.
It sounds so easy. It sounds so
Mhm.
easy to say, and so not easy. It sounds so obvious to say, like, yeah, I'm going to be paying attention to you, because then in
Mhm.
hearing about that, and like, I want to get to know you, um, I guess a part of me is listening to that, and I guess thinking back to like, well, I sure hope you would, because I'm coming to you and you should be doing that and all that other
Mhm.
stuff. But I guess really is is recognizing that as much as this may seem obvious or like a no-brainer, um, no, it's not obvious, and no, it's not a no-brainer, because that's not how everyone operates. Other people
Mhm.
operate in a still in an evidence-based place, but a little bit outside of that, where context doesn't really matter,
Mhm.
because you, like, not that you don't matter, but you in your context doesn't matter here, because that's not the issue. That's not what we're talking about. We're
Right.
talking about this specific presenting problem. So how do we target this particular behavior, and then how do we eliminate this behavior? um, the fact that you immigrated to Canada, uh, and were here on refugee status, and experienced trauma, and like all
Mhm.
whatever. Here's a real thing. Let's learn how to label these cognitive distortions. Let's learn how to intervene at a cognitive,
Mhm.
emotional, or behavioral level, and that really will revolutionize and change your life, because evidence suggests that it will, and in fact, it does. It supports that it will, and that stuff works. Which is my point to all of this, is not to say one model is better than the other, because
Mhm.
that's not my goal at all. Um, my point to all of this is to say, in hearing someone say, I want to get to know you,
Mhm.
it's really not a no-brainer, right?
Mhm.
Because that, honestly, that doesn't always happen. And I've had
Yeah.
many clients when I very much do that, because that's
Mhm.
where I come from too. I have
Mhm.
many clients sort of give me feedback saying, um, it felt so good for you to want to get to know me.
Yeah.
I've
Mhm.
never been asked these types of questions before.
Yeah.
I've seen
Mhm.
many a therapist before, and not one's really asked me,
Mhm.
has really sort of shown any interest, or has bothered to get to know me. Like,
Mhm.
well, I'm sorry that that's been your experience, and getting to know you is kind of really significant, because you're part of this bigger picture. I need to understand you in
Mhm.
context, not in isolation. Otherwise, I don't really understand the problem
Mhm.
in a vacuum. That's not where
Yeah.
the problem is. The problem does not exist in vacuum. It exists in this larger ecosystem. So let me understand, to the best of my ability, ignorances and biases and all. Let me try to understand your ecosystem, to see in what ways
Mhm.
I can work alongside you, and help support you in the ways that you would want to be supported, not in the ways that
Mhm.
I think you ought to be supported.
Mm. Mm.
Mhm. Wow, great. Great summary, Jason. Wow. Yeah. I think it just takes us back to those person-centered skills, right? And just recognizing that
Yeah.
really the number one factor in therapy is a therapeutic relationship. That's to me, that's the most important thing. And,
Mhm.
and and research says that as well, right? That is one of the most
Mhm.
important things. To make
Mhm.
clients feel comfortable, to open up, and to use that as a framework going forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate this conversation, because I think, well, when I was a baby therapist, just beginning my, my dipping my toes in working with clients, I felt like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I need to find sort of refuge, like safety in the theories. Okay, these are the black and white
Mm,
techniques, and I can use these, and this is my job, to help clients, right? My goal is to support clients, and I had to learn really, really early on that, yeah, that those are great skills, and I can use those in support. But if I don't tune in to getting to know the client first and build that rapport, that therapeutic relationship, those are just books. Those are just theories. Like the magic of
Mhm.
those doesn't
Mhm.
happen. So I really love your initial approach as you're at the beginning stages of becoming more and more a therapist, that you already have that knowing. Like, well done,
mm,
and it's really cool to see that insight that I certainly took me a little while to get to. Hmm.
mm. It can definitely be a winding road, right? To sort of figure out these things because
Yeah.
there, there's not really guidance for it. We're sort of left to figure this stuff out for ourselves. I mean, we have professors we can turn to, we have supervisors,
Mhm.
but it can be overwhelming for therapy students, right? So I think, yeah, just the takeaway from this conversation is if you start with theoretical orientations, I think you're dead in the water, right?
Mhm.
You have to start with the person first and who's sitting across from you. Yeah.
Mhm. I love that. Well, Jason, I'm wondering, is there another question there that you have that would be helpful for to hear Brock's answer?
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think this can take us in another helpful direction as
Sure.
well. So, as for those of us, well, of us here, but those listening and those watching, we on our Instagram page we have a link in the bio. There's a lot of buttons, blah blah blah. One of them takes you to this place where if you have any curiosities, questions, or wonderings about sex, intimacy, relationships, mental health, emotions, what have you, to just place them there and we speak about them here. So, one of those questions that came in has to do with just overall discomfort in therapy.
Mhm.
So,
Mm.
um, wondering to know sort of what both of you think, and I'll just read the question. So, the question says, "I've never been to therapy because I'm
Mhm.
nervous.
Mm.
Are there things that I can do to make myself more, feel more comfortable ahead of booking sessions?"
Mm.
Mm, interesting. I'm curious to hear what Carlin has to say on this one.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I was just processing that question, thinking back to what helped me and I actually started learning to be a therapist before I went to my first session as a client. Isn't that interesting, eh? And, at first time I went to see a therapist was in my master's program, and I noticed, some internalized, like, mental health stigma, like, "Oh, like, I know how to take care of myself. I don't need someone else's help. Like, I'm good. I'm the helper. I'm not the one that gets helped," Like, I had
Mm,
these, perhaps
mhm,
societal wounds that I've internalized around mental health stigma or, you know, some wounds about being the person to ask for help as if that's something that's not okay or that means I'm perhaps weak, not good enough, at taking care of myself. So what supported me is just, like, really attuning to those wounds and letting them go, and I found comfort in doing that with, like, no one has to know that I'm going to see a therapist. No one has to
mhm,
know. Um,
absolutely.
so, I can hold that, truth of, yeah, I need help, I need support. I don't have to tell my parents, even though they wouldn't care. They'd be like, "Go you," right? Or I don't have to tell my friends. But then, I also was like, how can I be a really good therapist if I've never been a client? That thought really supported me.
Yeah,
And so I
Mm.
imagine, that's not the case for everyone, that they're going to be a therapist one day. But that supported me. So somehow I made meaning of, like, that was outside the stories my wounds were telling me that made sense. Like, this is why I'm going. Not only do I need help and that's okay, but this is actually going to help me support others if I learn to ask for help. Um, and a big help to that too was being able to consult with the therapist before I actually hired them. So we at Relationship Matters offer this, many practices do, like a 15-minute free, like perhaps video
yeah,
or even in person sometimes consult so that I got to go and actually like feel the vibe, feel the energy of that person. And there were some, I did
mhm,
meet with a few people and I was like, I feel icky talking to you. Like, there's just something, I don't know what it
Mhm.
is. Not that they're bad therapists or anything, but
yeah,
just more like that's not the right fit for
right,
me. And I'm a pretty intuitive, like, connected with my body person that, like, my gut says no, like, then I know it's a no, right? And when I
mhm,
found through the consultations where my intuition was like, hell yeah, and I'm still working with that therapist, and it's been life changing. And now I'm not so scared of asking for help. I really was able to heal that wound of mine
mhm,
by that. So I think just familiarizing yourself with who's out there looking at bios, but also taking that step and doing the consultations that are offered for free. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your
That's
response
really
to
great.
that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think it's really important for therapists to know what it's like to be in the client's seat, right? You know, in my program, we're highly encouraged to seek out
Yeah.
our own therapy. Try it out. You know,
Mhm.
you don't have to go to therapy. You know, like if you have a presenting problem, like that's great. But if you don't have a presenting problem, you can still go to therapy, right? You know, there's benefit to
Exactly.
that. So I think as
Yeah.
therapists, as therapists, we need to remind ourselves what it's like for the client who's maybe never been to therapy before. Maybe they have, you know, they've been exposed, you know, in movies, TV shows, popular culture, right? They
Yeah.
I think therapy is misunderstood, right? How therapists are portrayed in the media can be very distorted and misunderstood. So I think, to your point, Carling, absolutely. Like I think it's vital that therapists know what it's like to be in the client seat, and that's
Yeah.
something that I've been mindful of. And like my first experience in therapy was when I dropped out of law school. You know, and I was at this point where I was like, okay, you know, things aren't good, and maybe you need to talk to someone, you know, and that's okay,
Yeah.
right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, absolutely. So just being mindful of what it's like for the client, and it's so important for therapists to have that other side, because if a therapist was practicing for, you know, 20, 30 years and they told me, oh yeah, but I've never been a client, I mean, that would just be so strange to me. I don't know about you guys, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Sure. Thank you, Brock.
There's a few things that come to mind for me. Like obviously, I'm not obviously. I'll just make that explicit. Yes, I am echoing a lot of what the two of you are saying. That part's not necessarily inherently obvious. Um, what comes to mind for me though is just that nervousness and making sense of it, right? So first of all, being nervous is normal, of course. Like contextualize what's about to happen. Typically, yes, though I agree with what you were saying, Brock, that um, there could be some crisis or something uncomfortable or a problem there for you to go to therapy, but a lack of a problem doesn't in and of itself warrant not going. Um, that said, in my experience, most people go with problems, and that's
yes,
I
yes.
get it. That part I get. So contextualizing that for a second, you're going to meet a brand new stranger, and the intention is that you're going to be uh, emotionally stripped naked in front of this stranger, and you're supposed to feel comfortable with all of that. No, of course not. I don't know you. I don't know you at
Yeah.
all, and I'm supposed to be comfortable in that space.
Yeah,
No.
Yeah.
So does it make sense for me to be nervous even thinking about essentially stripping down emotionally in front of someone? It's very vulnerable to
It
do,
is.
right?
mhm,
It's very risky to do. It's very scary to do. There's very good reason to not do that, right? Which is why for some people it takes a while because there's a lot of justification of here's my good enough reasons for not being able to do it. My problem's not big enough. I'm overthinking it. I'm going to get judged,
Yeah.
etc. Right? There's going to be
Yeah.
all of these different barriers that
mhm.
justify my lack of action. So ultimately, if you're noticing yourself being in that position where you are wanting some supports from a mental health professional, um, and there's some hesitation, that hesitation makes sense.
Yeah.
It absolutely makes sense, right? Like the context is very scary. You're invited into a space that over time becomes comfortable. At the very beginning, it's a little bit or a lot of it uncomfortable. The other piece that I would add outside of normalizing this is simply an invitation. is if you're on the fence of do I or don't I, trying to understand, like inviting you into thinking about what is that discomfort all about? What are you uncomfortable about?
Mhm.
And just really sitting with that and trying to play that scenario out in your mind, right? Because it could be I'm scared that the therapist is going to think that I'm crazy, or I'm scared that
Mhm.
I'm going to get judged, or I'm scared that with couples therapy, I'm very against couples therapy because I'm afraid that the therapist is going to break us up.
Mhm.
Or I'm very afraid to go to couples therapy because I'm afraid that the therapist is going to blame me,
Mm.
or any other version of that,
Mhm.
right? To say, look, what's really holding you back? What's that discomfort? If you were able to identify this as a client, maybe just writing some of those bullet points down, so
Mhm.
Yeah.
that way, to Carling's point, if you are able to get consultations with
Mhm.
therapists, which we do all the time,
Mhm.
because we're testing for chemistry, right? Like, do we click
Yeah.
or not? Do you like me?
Yeah.
In a brief little
Yeah.
introduction, you get
Mhm.
enough of a vibe of someone
True.
to then say, yeah, okay, sure, I'll give it a shot. Or, nah, you're too much of a creep. No way am I doing that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
there's going to be something there
Yeah.
that says, yes, I'm comfortable, or no, I'm not. So if you have a consultation and you've done that self-reflection, consult on those things that you've already reflected on. Is, hey, so I'm curious to know, if I were the client, hey, I'm curious to know, um, do you ever side with your couples? Do you often find that
Mm.
one person is to blame, and do you
Mhm.
tell them that's the thing, and so on and so forth? Because you're highlighting those, your own insecurities, your own worries, which are legitimate,
Mhm.
and see how the therapist handles that,
Yeah.
right? In how
Yeah.
they've just handled it. Do you feel comforted in how they were able to answer you? Do you feel like the question was answered uh, authentically and not performative? Because the thing that really turns me off is when there's fakeness in the room,
Mhm.
and you
Yeah.
can just see
Mhm.
it and face it and smell it and taste it, and you're like, nah, 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 nah,
Yeah.
nah, nah,
That's the ick factor
nah,
I
I'm not
was
here.
saying. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ick for me.
Yeah.
The minute anyone goes into,
Yeah.
okay, yes, like, no, no, can you just
Bye.
cut that shit? Like, that's performative. I'm not here for any type of performance. I'm here to speak with a person. Are
Mhm.
you a person? Yes or no? You, because you're a person who happens to be a therapist, or are you a therapist who's just knowing of everything? Because if you're knowing of everything, cute. Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Next.
The end.
I love that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow, Jason. Yeah, that's a great summary. And I would just tell
Mhm.
prospective clients, right? It's completely normal to feel anxious your first time in therapy.
Yeah.
Trust your gut,
Mhm.
listen to your intuitive voice,
Yeah.
and ask your therapist questions. Don't be afraid to ask them anything on your
Yes.
mind.
Yes.
The therapy experience is
Exactly.
for you, and
Mhm.
they're there for
Mhm.
you. And if you leave the session feeling you're just not clicking with the therapist, that's okay, right? Because there's a therapist for everyone,
Mhm.
and we all have. I mean, we're people first, right? So we all have
Mhm.
different personalities, right? And it's natural that
Mhm.
sure you're gonna click with
Mhm.
some people, and other ones you're like, yeah, sorry, not for me. I'm sure you're a great therapist, but just yeah. So just trust your intuition, and yeah, yeah,
Just as much as we're not friends with every single human being on this planet, the same,
exactly.
because we don't click with everyone, the same thing is true when it comes to therapists,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
Or other healthcare providers, right?
That's
It's
true.
just the that opens me up to more like systemic conversations, and
Mhm.
talking about the system of healthcare, and sort of the
hmm
availability or lack thereof of providers, which makes it feel like you have no choice, even if you like your
Mhm.
family doctor or you dislike your family doctor, you can't do anything about it
right.
because there's no one else there. that's a separate thing. But it still is very, 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 very true. Like you still have to feel comfortable in the healthcare provider relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and in our case, it would be the therapeutic relationship. And if it doesn't click, that's totally cool. It doesn't have to, because it won't
Mm-hmm.
click with everybody. I know I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
I am for some, but not for all. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
cool with that. Just as much as everyone is not my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's weird.
Exactly.
I am everyone's cup of tea. Just kidding. I know I'm not.
I want. Yeah, no. I think the tea that you were drinking there is called delusion. But
Delusional
Oh,
tea.
okay.
It's a good
delusional
tasting
tea.
tea, though. Uh, you, you know what
Love
though,
it.
this is making me think, just as our time is wrapping up here, it's making me think of what one of our primary intentions of bringing Brock on to the team, not just because we adore Brock and think he's spectacular, but also that we are doing our best to chip away at the systemic barriers of getting good mental health care, one very much being the financial access. Many of you are
Mhm.
probably familiar with long wait lists when there's publicly funded
Yeah.
low fee sessions for psychotherapy. And yes, Jason and I created a private practice, which is for full fee. However, because we can bring in Brock as a intern, we are going to be able to offer a lower fee, perhaps even sliding scale fee sessions, which is in our way on addressing some of the financial barriers to healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
right? The barriers that shouldn't be there,
Yeah.
let's put it simply, right? But that are very much there, that we all exist in. So definitely stay up to date on our website as we are working away at that, and highlighting Brock as part of the team and the sessions of the fees to work with him. Starting, he's starting in April, but the sessions will be starting in May. Okay.
Cool.
Mm.
What's our website, Carly?
Oh, what is our website? No, www.relationshipmatterstherapy.com. I should probably have said that, or thank you for reminding me to share with everyone. And you're also able to find out information about us on our Instagram account at Relationship Matters Therapy. And yeah, please check that account out, because we put our Ask Us Anything link to ask our anonymous questions that we answer, but also our YouTube channel. If you want to see our lovely faces, you can access it through our Relationship Matters Therapy handle on Instagram. Awesome.
Totally. Just head to our website. All of the links in it for everything social and all the other stuff. It's all there. So just
Yeah.
peruse the website.
Awesome.
And
Well,
I will
thank
be on the
you
website
sincerely
eventually.
so much.
I'm coming.
You will, yes, very soon, Brock. Absolutely,
Friday.
very soon.
Yeah.
And well, I'm sure we'll be having you on our Instagram account at some point too. So, yeah, sincerely
Yep.
thank you for joining us today, Brock. We are so pumped that you're starting soon. And it was really cool to hear your absolute brilliance today. Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you for having me on. Yeah. It's my first podcast ever, so that's exciting. I can cross that off the
Ooh.
bucket list.
Love it.
You rocked it.
Love it.
Yeah.
You did. You did. All right, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time to listen, watch, find us, and Brock and Carling, thanks for taking the time to be with me and everyone listening today. Until next time, we're always here to just try to improve these connections and enhance our relationships. So until next time, take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.